When you got to education in the United States, you talked about affirmative action, and you came up with some statistics, and I wanted to ask you about. Well, I look for, here it is. You said that at the University of California at Berkeley, for example, where the entering freshman class has been described as, quote, wonderfully diverse, unquote, because the, quote, class closely reflects the actual ethnic distribution of California high school students. These are your words. More than 70% of black students fail to graduate.
Yes.
Why?
Because they're mismatched with Berkeley. That is, these students, the average black student at Berkeley is above the national average on test scores. It's just that the average white student is further above the national average, and the average Asian student further above than the white students. And so in that atmosphere, these students who have every qualification to succeed are artificially turned into failures. And the only beneficiary of that is the University of California at Berkeley. Because what they've effectively done is rented these bodies for window dressing for a few years. And then when they're through with them, they're put aside. A new bunch of bodies are brought in.
Let's take it first from the student standpoint. Of 312 black students entering Berkeley in 1987, all were admitted under affirmative action. You say that 70% of those failed to graduate. What would you tell those students to do under the circumstances, knowing that statistic?
I would tell them what I've told students in general of all races to do, which is to go to schools that match your educational capabilities at the time. Because you need to be matched with a school. You shouldn't try to go to where the glitzy name is or what have you. Now, unfortunately, many of the minority students have such low income that they must go to wherever the money is. And the money is disproportionately at the kinds of schools that they will find very, very difficult to graduate from.
What you oppose, as I understand it, and as your book very plainly states, is any preferential treatment that disguises objective standards. Is that correct?
Yes, and particularly since the net effect of the preferential treatment, which is preferential in intention more so than in results, is that those blacks who are particularly disadvantaged have fallen further behind under these policies, that such policies have typically benefited those blacks who are well off, who became better off. And this is true also in other countries. In India, there's a program in Bombay, and someone who wrote about this commented that this program is for the benefit of the clerks, not the coolies. But that's been true in general, and that's what's true in the United States. That it's not the coolies that benefit, it's the clerks that benefit, who then aspire to higher occupations. For example, blacks who have relatively less work experience, lower levels of education, black female-headed families, all these groups have fallen further behind during a decade or more of affirmative action. Black female-headed families have had an absolute decline in real income over this span and have fallen further behind white female-headed families. At the same time, black couples who are both college educated earn higher incomes than white couples who are both college educated. So that this whole program makes it, provides incentives to hire blacks who are safe. Therefore, one will make some effort towards one's quota, but one will not take in people who might not progress enough for their promotions and discharge patterns to satisfy the government. So you make it risky to hire average blacks and more desirable to hire blacks who have not privileges, but advantages.
There is considerable revulsion against it. Isn't this just a bit of historical justice that's being established?
I'm afraid I simply do not see the justice in making people who are badly off worse off in the name of advancing them. I think that when one makes a profound change in a society, arousing enormous passions across the board, that the burden of proof should be on those who think that this is beneficial. Because I have been listening very carefully and you have yet to hear the benefit to disadvantaged blacks that has been empirically discovered after affirmative action.
Would it be your feeling that if all the affirmative action programs were discontinued, women and minorities would go ahead much faster than they have under the affirmative action program?
Yes, it's not my opinion. The data indicate that, for example, Puerto Ricans had a higher percentage of the national average income before quotas than after. So did Mexican Americans. Blacks had about the same. So there's a marvelous putting of the burden on other people. You're saying here's this massive program that has existed now for a decade, and you're unable to show me
things have
the
gotten better.
benefits that have come from all this enormous controversy.
Well, it certainly has been a revolution insofar as women's participation in the labor force
Not
and in
really,
professions
not
that's
really.
concerned.
No, it hasn't. No,
I
it
know
hasn't.
that of my own knowledge.
No, you don't know it of your own knowledge, because I've also looked at the same thing. And in the past, you found women overrepresented in many professional occupations, much more so than today, and you find that decline in those occupations much more highly correlated with a lower age of marriage for college women and with more childbearing. And as those two things, those two demographic factors have changed, women have also changed in their representation. So there's this whole myth that's been created that this is all a function of political developments of the past decade or so, just will not stand up.